Is just about to begin. So I'm just going to repeat a little bit about phenomenal conversations for anybody tuning into this after this dialogue has occurred. So this is phenomenal conversation number 36, invitation to the living edge of Eros, and Pamela von Sabljar has very kindly agreed to be interviewed. And also we have a number of people in the room that we're going to co-explore this after this interview ends. So Pamela, I never actually share a biography of the speaker because I feel that that doesn't do justice to who they are. So I'd love you to share a little bit about your biography and how you came to be this pioneering the edge of Eros as your kind of life's work at the moment.
Oh, thank you, Dave, and thank you for the invitation to be here. I really appreciate it. And I can always notice when someone asks me like to share my bio, I always get a bit contracted because I'm like, how should I bring myself down to something that is tangible and possibly concrete? And at the same time, I'm just going to take a bite in that challenge again. So I've been a speaker and a facilitator and a mentor for 25 plus years. And if I would see a red thread is that in my early 20s, I could see that the future that was coming, we were not fully prepared for it. And that I could see that there were required inner skills and abilities and capacities in both how we lead ourselves, but also how we lead others. And I could see that if I just looked at the school system, for example, I could see that we were not prepared for what was coming out of what I could vision. So that kicked me off of having then 25 years of a full engagement in what is the next edge of leadership. And 25 years ago, it looked in one way. And then I've just been keep on following that thread of unfoldment. And today I'm still on that edge of what is leadership and what is the next edge in leadership. And my answer 25 years ago looks different than today. And still it has a very clear red thread. So leadership has been a part of my bio for 25 plus years. My role as a speaker, a public speaker, and my role as a facilitator. And I've had the great pleasure to facilitate our children, our youth, our grown-ups, individuals, groups, organizations, both in like the public sector and in business sector. So I feel blessed to have quite a broad scene of exploration. And then and on that edge of leadership, like what has been the quest is also consciousness development and also collective, like looking at where is the next evolving edge of consciousness taking us. And it always has been a connection between individual and systemic and how they feed into each other. And around, let's say, the more time I spend in the present moment, less good I am to keep like years and time frames. So I also have to like slow down, so I'm not like being too off when I name numbers and years and stuff. So I would say around 15, 17 years ago, I could notice in my way of working when I was facilitating group processes that, and also in individual one-on-one mentoring session, I could notice that my intuition started to take me on a journey that was beyond instinct and intuition. And today I would name it as the evolutionary impulse of Eros, or in other contexts, I maybe would say spark. When we can notice a spark that enlivens us or animates us, elevates us, energizes us, or bringing us into a certain curiosity. It's almost like a lot of curiosity, like we cannot not go there. We can, but it takes a lot of effort to not go there. And I could notice that there was almost like a spontaneously or organic, maybe it's a better word, or both are good enough to use, organic emergence that started to happen, where I could notice that the team that I worked in, when we were facilitating holding space for a group process and creating transformative spaces, I could notice that we, by following these impulses and trusting them deeply. Today, I would use the word transpersonal trust, trusting something that was greater and bigger than myself. I used a very simple language back then. I said, trust the process. I said, trust that there is just something greater than us, whatever we want to call it. I could just I had a felt sense of that there was a greater intelligence moving through. I started to notice that we as a team, and I worked in 2 different organizations, so it was 2 different teams, and some of the team members walked in between these 2 organizations. And we started to pay attention to that we dropped into a shared awareness. I didn't name it like that then. It has taken time to find the right words and finding others who also have been innovating on these edges. And in the integral community, they would most likely call it we spaces.
We space, yeah.
But dropped into a shared awareness where we noticed that we could read each other's thoughts. Not all the thoughts, but the important thoughts that was a part of the next evolutionary evolvement in the group, or where we were heading in the direction. And we could notice that we could deeply feel each other's feelings, but we could also notice that we became almost like one body. So we could feel the feelings that was in the room, and the thoughts that was in the room, and we could notice where the energy was pulling us. And we could notice it came creativity, like a inspiration or a solution that we didn't see before, or innovation or intervention in the group process. And we could notice it was not only one person. We could notice it was yes, the creativity came, but it came in 4 people at the same time. And so we developed trust in resonance. As long as we feel resonance, we knew that this was the next right step. And we could also notice that we could start to, and this was still nascent, it was that we could start to with intention, we could guide each other in I could actually guide with my intention, the other could pick up that they should go somewhere and do something, an action with maybe some people in the room, or that they should go put on the music on or change the music. Or so that was a marvelous exploration, and quite taking as well. And we could notice that because it happened both in a youth program that I was running, where we were working with self-leadership with youth, and it also happened with adults. And we could notice that the young people that are the youth that most often are more authentic and less filtered, they could just speak into us as love. And I would name it as coherence, or I would name it as the agapic energy, a greater love. But they could what happened in that coherence was more radical authenticness came forward. So even if 50 young people could suddenly drop into a very authentic space, so it was. And today, and I know in some of integral places, they talk this as being highly individuated. I'm not saying that they stepped out and then lived their life from there, but it was they got a moment of awakening into, I can trust to be fully me in a group space, and I feel love. I would name it as coherence today. And then there was just, today I call it Eros. I couldn't see the creativity, the life force energy moving through like 50 young people. And they were just like in a creative act responding to it. But when I leaned back and observed it, because when that happened on the 4th day, we spent 5 days together, it was so animated. So it almost became magic or unreal, or just it felt like it was the greatest payment ever, because this was nonprofit work with the youth. I was just like, just witnessing like a force of creativity moving through and just like playing out in different ways. So that's how you asked me for my bio, and I'm just went off in something here. But
that's a great description, though. That was a great, valuable description.
Yeah. So from that organically emergence, I have just kept on following where I is supposed to go and be, and where I should learn, and where I should share, and where I should practice. Yeah. So that's my I think that I will end there. Yeah.
Well, thanks for that very beautiful story. I think that illustrates the possibility of what can occur and arise between humans when we're looking in the right direction. I'm going to divert from my original questions, because there's something you're bringing up that you talked about, individuality, and in a way, one of the big problems of modern society as it stands today is this hyper individuality. But I think you're talking about a different kind of individuality that's based on relationship, a deeper level of relationship. So I wondered what your thoughts are about how this potential, when it arises, brings into vision this kind of deep relationality.
Yeah, there are a couple of threads coming up. Just going to see where they're most aliveness right now. I would say, yeah, the hyper individuality that you speak into, I see it is one outcome of the modern and postmodern society, and how I receive it, it's separate. It's separate from the whole.
Yeah.
So, and very often then, because of that, separate from the relational. So it's like I can see, and another perspective that comes in is, most of us in this room probably know that for a long, long time, we have had people who have had a very clear relationship or channel to the transpersonal, and channeling personal eros. Like artists are doing that, like creative people are doing that. Sometimes entrepreneurs are doing that, athletes are doing that. So it's personal in a way. You can say it's also highly individual. But I wouldn't say it's always have to be hyper individual. It can be as well.
Yeah.
But then the edge that I am really drawn to is the collective eros, that how we as a group can step into a shared awareness and be highly individuated, like worked so much with our inner world and who we are. So we are having the boldness to bring our full self into a group space, and bringing it as a way of being used as a greater vehicle. I see that possibly the next step of diversity. Like postmodernity has been beautiful in bringing in our consciousness around the importance of diversity and so on. But possibly the next step of diversity is not how many colored or non-colored do we have in a room, how many of the different sex do we have in a room, how different sexuality do we have in a room, but actually every person in the room, can they be their full authentic self, and by that inviting in a rich diversity out of like the ground they're standing on, and everything that they are. So for me, that's a quite clear difference. And very often a hyper individual in the modern postmodern society very often has a trouble to be in groups.
Yeah.
And community and communion and coherence.
Yeah.
So for me, that's a distinct difference.
So,
Dave, sorry for interrupting.
No, please go ahead.
I also see there is a distinction. The last years, me exploring different we spaces, I also noticed that I'm so grateful for all the consciousness and the work that the different we space community has done up till now, because they've been really good, most of them, to work and practice coherence.
Yeah.
But what I also have noticed that very often the possibility what can happen stalls, because still in the collective there is work to do on our sexuality. So we actually can hold Eros without we believing or need to challenge into sexual as a sexual act, and not because of like social shame or individual shame shut down when we notice that energy, because many of us interpreted it as, oh, sexuality, I should fuck anyone. That could happen, but it's not was necessarily what I'm pointing towards. So looking at what's possibly next now, after being doing all the work that many we spaces have done when it comes to coherence. So that's also a distinction that I see of what else can we do from here and from now. And I'm not saying that there's not we spaces that has full-blown Eros energy in it as well. I just say that that's one thing that I've noticed.
Okay, well, I've got about 4 questions based on that, but maybe we'll just start with the because I've heard you mention it before about sexuality and the fact that if fear or anxiety comes up in relationship to the erotic, that you're just saying that kind of can get blocked. So in terms of personal practice, well, do you recommend that people do tantra workshops, or what is it do you think that shifts that relationship? Maybe practicing celibacy, who knows? But what is it do you recommend, or what do you see as being able to shift that blockage or that unconsciousness, you could say, in the collective?
I think we're quite blessed in our times, because we have come to a point where we have a lot of really good practices in different areas. Doesn't matter if it's relating or shadow work or men's or women work or like. So I would more recommend that choose the practice that works for you and that you are drawn to for now. Check in. So it stands on a good lineage that has a good reputation to do great work and have great results in the world. I think these 2 perspectives maybe is the most important. And then if you choose to work with a somatic trauma therapist around your sexuality, if that's what you need, or if about working, going into a tantric path, then you do that. Or if it's about doing men's and women work, just to get that done, or just have a different type of body work that works with your body, or narrative work. It's just like, what is my stories around sex and sexuality? What is to look into it, not only your individual, but also the systemic. So I would say, choose what works for you. Be grounded in what you choose, so you can see that there is good results out of what you choose, and trust that.
Well, that's wonderful, because I think even my questions kind of folded in this binary of erotic and sexuality, but actually you're kind of bringing out something that's related to sort of discovering oneself in many different dimensions actually creates a possibility for the Eros to come through one as an one can express Eros more spontaneously and intuitively if one's working to connect to one's own life energy, however one's doing it. That's what I'm hearing you just said.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just back to this thing you were talking about in the collective and individuation. And I noticed there's a couple of times you've used the phrase that there's something inherent in this, let's say, spiritual individuation or healthy individuation, where there seems to be a natural inclination to serve or give and create health in the collective or in the space or on the project. Seems to me, anyway, from what you've said, is that something that you have noted?
Well, say again. I hear an interesting question, and I can't fully grasp.
Okay, well, I'll give it another go. So there's something that when people are blooming and flowering in this way in the collective space, there seems to be a natural inclination to give to the whole. And so, you talk about 4 people having the same idea. It's not me with that idea, or there's a greater awareness of the whole and some kind of longing or yearning to for the whole to be healthier, or for it to thrive, and for every member to belong as fully as possible. That's you didn't say that, but I'm just expanding upon it.
Yeah, and here I have to say, I have to start with I don't know.
Okay.
As I don't know. I would probably say it's what is your bigger intention?
Yeah. Okay.
But what I would say is, what I've noticed is that for most humans in the modern and postmodern worldview, that worldview is based on separation, and that I am a separate self.
Yeah.
And it's also based on parts and not the whole, and it's based on rationality and science. And so far, what I'm aware of, and if anyone else in the space knows something else, please tell me, I don't think we have rock solid science that can point towards that life force energy truly exists, as we can point that gravitation exists.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, for me, it's a felt sense, a lived experience. I don't question it.
Yeah.
And still, so for stepping into or having the openness and curiosity to start exploring that there is possibly a different worldview, I think there is some kind of awakening into another narrative that is wholeness. That is that there is something greater fueling us, whatever we want to name that as. And with that, I do think spontaneously it comes, and I think that's what you point towards, because when you sit in as a group, or more even just 2 people, and you can drop to a deep space of coherence, then there is a deep realization that you are another me and I am another you, and there is more a we and an I, and still there is an I.
Yeah.
So how could I harm you without harming myself?
Yeah. Yeah.
How could I hurt you without hurting myself?
Yeah.
So, and also that for me also, like in that worldview, it's also life force energy is then a part of cosmos and earth. If it's in every flower, every tree, every animal, every human, and it goes through the earth and out in cosmos and back, then suddenly my narrative that is still the postmodern and the modern, that I am separate from nature, it's to crack. I am nature. So then I am that force. So then whatever that force wants is not only for me, it's for us, and it's beyond humans as well. Like it's it's for the whole, and that includes planet, everything that lives here, and cosmos and universe. So micro macro perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and And in deep coherence, in my experience, and I can only speak from that, I want good.
Yeah.
I just want good. It's like a reflex. It's almost
Yeah.
like it just is. And also, if we look at our biological nature as pack animals, that's also is forgotten in this worldview. And it's getting more remembered. Like it's just the shift that happened the last 5 years and 10 years. Like, yeah, my 20-year-old is like just taken by how fast it goes right now, depending on how slow it was 25 years ago.
Yeah.
But then also, yeah, I lost the thread a bit, but it's for the whole.
Yeah.
It's for the whole, and it becomes, for me at least, very tangible and spiritual at the same time.
Yeah.
Because I do receive it both feeds into the greater evolution in the universe, and I don't have a clue where it's going, but it seems, if you look at what we're standing on by religion and different wisdom tradition and indigenous traditions, it points towards more complexity, more grace, more prosperity, more beauty.
Yeah.
Whatever that would look like. And it points towards, I can just see, if I just take myself a very concrete example, I have deeply devoted myself the last 10 years to, as much as I am capable of, to follow the sparks of Eros.
Yeah.
And it has taken me through pain and pleasure, that is the fabric of this reality, and constructions and deconstructions, and I am still becoming a greater version.
Yeah. Yeah.
With more grace and more beauty, and like, and I see that around me as well. I don't think I'm in any way as special or specific. I see it as a, how do you say that in English? An absolute. It seems that seems what happens. And even if in the darkest moment when the force pulls me apart, and it can be deeply painful, but keep on walking and keep on expanding into it and allow the emergence, the evolution that wants to happen. It takes me to my next layer of evolvement, and it happens for me, no matter light or dark or painful or pleasurable or death, like or rebirth or birth. Yeah. I hope I responded to the question.
That was a glorious answer. That was a glorious answer. Thank you. Really,
so sorry, Dave, even more sorry. So if I would say one word, it seems to take us to more generativity.
Generativity.
Life affirming, life serving. Like, and how that looks like, it doesn't have to be rainbows and dolphins and flowers. That can be dark.
Or unicorns.
Yeah, or unicorns. It can be that, hopefully. But no, like it can be really dark. And I think we are, I think we're seeing that right now as well. Yeah, on a systemic level.
Well, thanks so much for that. It was a beautiful evocation of possibility channeled through you, and really loved the way you expressed yourself. I was curious, just go back a little bit, because you expressed gratitude in terms of the We Space work other groups are done, and I've heard Tom and Elizabeth DeBold, who are kind of doing this emergent interbeing work, and they've talked about different sort of types of interactions in spheres: the personal, the interpersonal, and the intersubjective, I think they called it, or this being this kind of more cosmic domain. So what is it you think that some of these things like authentic relating, or maybe circling, or some of these other well-known practices that are obviously opening people to be together, to be in community, to be in circle, and to explore? In addition, is there anything in addition to the sort of, you mentioned about sexual barriers being limited in some spaces? What is it? Are there some limitations in interpersonal work that don't necessarily extend into a sense of cosmic belonging that you just so beautifully expressed.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And I can notice like it makes me happy to hear you mention Elizabeth and Thomas' name, because I had the great pleasure to collaborate with them for a couple of years. And one thing that I brought out of that collaboration was to distinct the different gravity points in consciousness with personal, interpersonal, and intersubjective.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm very happy that that was one of many fruitful exchanges we had in our exploration. And I also hosted a emergent dialogue training with them, and other training. So, and also I had the great pleasure to work with Ria Beck, and I with collective presencing, and Ria's book. I feel it's in a way so concrete and practical, and she points towards some like elements in this work that is I haven't found it so beautifully concrete and practical. I can really recommend it. So what I could say is, yeah, I'm just gonna write it. So I keep it comes several threads. I'm just gonna see where to start. Yeah, I think it's really valuable to want to talk about this work, because you named a couple of practices that the personal standpoint in our gravity, in our consciousness, that most of us is the way we relate in the modern world or in the West. That's my most well known for me, so I would speak most about that.
Yeah.
Is that when you start on your journey of meditation, for example, or reflection like inquiry or journaling, you very often start to become aware of your inner world. You become aware of thoughts, feelings, sensations from your body. If you live very disconnected from your body, just feeling your heartbeat is a big thing. Or just feeling that, wow, I can notice that my blood is pulsating on some areas on my body, or I can notice actually life force energy moving through my fascia. That is the personal realm. And in meditation, in the beginning, some of us have the being blessed by having maybe awakening, and then suddenly you're in love with cosmos in your first meditation, but that's quite rare. Meditation is a practice as it starts, that starts with your inner world, for example. But as further you go in that practice, my experience is that it opens up, and then suddenly the boundaries of your skin is gone, and you're connected to source. You're connected to something that is greater. And the interpersonal, and the personal could also be like just knowing my inner landscape, my trauma architecture, my different personalities, and my go-to in my nervous system, how it reacts to different things out of the trauma I have, and so on. So all that is landscapes to be explored in my inner world, my personal. And also then the interpersonal practices that you mentioned, authentic relating, circling, sometimes ritual play. It's very much in the dimension of the interpersonal, the relating aspect. And to be able to be sensitized and attuned to the relational field. In the starting point, it is I and you, and it's a we. But it's more around the personal, and there, and you can still come to a point where you deepen that practice. You can become so sensitive, so you will be aware of in the relational field in a group, what goes around, like with feelings and thoughts and dynamics and so on. And that itself is a collective intelligence. And it's not the collective intelligence I talk about when I work. And then when you do that practice long enough, my experience is also that you can drop into an intersubjective awareness or an intersubjective gravity point in your awareness. And that is probably where I went in the start, when this spontaneously started to emerge in my life. Because we work deeply with the personal, interpersonal. but drop through there into a deeper space.
Yeah.
Intersubjective awareness is a gravity point in consciousness where you point towards directly a shared awareness, and you point towards becoming aware of the space between us, within us, and beyond us.
Right. Okay.
You point both to the personal, interpersonal, and the space between, but you point beyond the starting where you can go with it.
Right.
And you point towards that you surrender to something that is bigger than the sum of the group, that there is like a third force, there is a greater intelligence. There is now, Thomas and Elizabeth now call it interbeing.
Interbeing,
That's Thich Nhat Hanh at Plum Village also called it. So that is there is a becoming of an intelligence that moves through us.
Yeah.
That is beyond the sum of the group. And I would say the two forces, agape, the coherence, and the eros, the life force energy, is two energies that works us, and the third thing comes alive when that synthesis deep enough.
Well, it's interesting you could say that, because I think you had something else to say. Please do.
Sorry that
It's fine.
Yeah, and what I also have seen, it's like the last 7 years, almost, no, I would more maybe true is more 7 to 10 years. I'm not any longer pointing my consciousness towards the traumas,
Right.
not because there's something wrong with it. There are great people doing that in the collective. But what I have noticed when we point towards the intersubjective, it seems to be a higher frequency, if I would name it like that. So the field that gets created is very healing. Like coherence is very healing.
Yeah.
But the intention and the focus is not healing. The focus and intention is creativity and systemic change for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Whatever needs to be healed will come up, either as a personal or as the personal as a mirror for the systemic. Like what is that through that person, we need to learn something because we maybe lack the capacity in our joint nervous system to hold that specific tension. And that's where we either collapse or ejaculate the experience, the awareness or consciousness we're in. So for me, that has become an important distinction point, because also what I see is when we focus on eros, like pleasure, we can heal our nervous system by have heightened amount of pleasure. Because when our nervous system can't hold intensity, it's not only pain we talk about, it's also pleasure. So when we focus on pleasure and we hit like an edge in our nervous system, then we need to tend to it. And what I also have seen, and still I'm just in the innovation and I'm learning, but I saw something very profound one specific time. We were a smaller group practicing together in flesh, because most of this practice today I do online, because it seems to be easier for us online to tap into it for now. And we had a very clear rule together. And we had easy. We said, follow the energy, and everything is welcome. And then we said, if we notice that someone goes off and more like, because sometimes you can be in it and speak from it and speak to it, and then you get a bit caught by your mind. And then you a little bit jerk off on your own mind and you go off because you're a little bit in love with your own thoughts or what comes up. And that's okay, that's fine. But then we're out of it. And very often when that happens, when you're tuned and presencing, you notice it. But we are sometimes too nice. So we stay with it and then we derail a bit. And that's okay. But we were very like devoted to say, when that happens, we're just going to turn away. We're just going to show with our body language that we're not in it anymore. You're not in it anymore. So now we're not attracted because we're supposed to follow the energy. That's what we do. And it was one moment it happened, and this time it was a man who slipped out, and he got a bit triggered because he felt stupid and like, oh, I didn't like, whatever can come. And then we just held it, and then I slipped into my personal. So I started to facilitate him from the personal into personal, and the trigger actually increased.
Yeah.
And he noticed. And he said, wait, stop doing whatever you're doing. Stop doing it because it increases. Go back. And I was just like, I went back, and then it diffused. So it's a very important learning moment where it's like, so we should just keep on doing that. So that is the different distinction point to going back and wrap up.
Yeah.
Personal, interpersonal, intersubjective. Right now, where I'm really pulled is to point our consciousness straight into the intersubjective. From there, trust the healing that needs to happen will happen, and still keep the healing in the intersubjective.
Yeah.
That's where wow, I can notice Eros coming in now. Like, oof, that's an edge that I'm really
rescuers aren't allowed. So I think we're going to wrap up. I have one final question, and I mean, the way you're expressing this, I'm really finding very delightful. And of course, I've been a practitioner in this work for a number of years myself. And one of the things that I'm kind of conscious of is, in a way, without this consciousness, co-created consciousness of the cosmos and our not just notional interdependence, but real interdependence and connection, our kind of pressing world problems are kind of going to get really on top of us without us being able to come together and work through and be together in this way. However, there's one strand of me thinks, well, this needs to be a practice apart from the world where we practice and get good of it because it's so desperately needed on one hand that it's still so early, like you're pointing out. On the other hand, I feel the pressing need of the ecological systemic pressures, and there's the kind of sacredness is preserved if you don't bring it to that, but somehow the world desperately needs something like this. And I'm curious about whether you've seen this being applied, if you can use that word, or maybe it isn't applicable, but to systemic issues, or where you've seen this sort of consciousness affect a systemic issue, because in a way, that's sort of that's the challenge ahead, as you were so clearly seeing 20 years ago. There's still massive challenges ahead, or even greater now than they were then.
Yeah. I do see it in many sense-making places that there is a consciousness around that this capacity is needed.
Yeah.
And my devotion is how can we, and I know I share that example with both Thomas and someone, I think it was you, Francesca, Thomas Steiniger and Elizabeth de Bold, Evolve and Emerge Dialogue. If you Google that, you will find them. We and others, there are many, we all are devoted to how can this consciousness be supportive for the systemic change we're in.
Yeah.
One devotion I have is to practice to bring this into different groups and places so we can dialogue from this consciousness. So we can put in like a systemic challenge with the people who has the cognitive complexity, the experience, the wisdom, the heart, and a sense of practice of presence or presencing, and see what happens from there, what emerged from there. But I also have seen that Bitcoin's DAO organization has taken me in to support the core team into this consciousness, to be able to work together from there, because they Because if you look at source work with Peter Koenig, and also you could say Thiel, with like where you believe there is an evolutionary purpose, where you believe that the project or the initiative or the organization has its own life as a potential entity. So me as a source keeper, I am in relationship to that. And sub-sources are in relationship. So the more I can listen, I can actually respond to the evolution of that organism, that entity. If we as a team can enhance our capacity to be in shared awareness, we can also tap into, I believe, a deeper river of creativity. And that's what has happened in the different practice groups I've been a part of. It's like you can see it like when a jazz band is playing. And so like they don't prepare, but they jam together. And then they can be like, they tap into like a river of creativity or like a pond. And then suddenly in the jam, they get into a groove, and then poof, they're down in a deeper stream, and they're in it.
Yeah.
Public is in that, the audience is in it. So that's the potential I am really drawn to. And that's also what I've seen when you pull in to work with a masculine and feminine polarity. It seems to be a psychedelic for our consciousness without psychedelic. Like the polarity itself can harness the Eros energy. So it has altered our state of consciousness, so we can actually bring in even more creativity. So where that can lead us, I don't know. I'm drawn to it, yes. I am onto something indeed. If it will be in 100 years beyond me, I don't know. If it will be, yeah.
Oh, thanks for that. And that's some great examples. And you kind of proposing Eros as a psychoactive substance or non-substance. Well, thanks so much, Pamela. That's been really, really enjoyable to have this in-depth conversation and bring this these dimensions to the foreground. So we're going to stop the interview there.